A lot of people have reasons why they either walk away from a certain movement or change their attitude. That's kind of a more general way of talking about why you sort of evolve in your opinions. And I think false rape accusations or kind of sketchy trials, things like that, those are inflection points in the way Americans think about certain topics. You know, the O.J. Simpson case, I know, you know, a lot of people don't want to admit it, but it did change race relations in the USA. You can talk about the L.A. riots. Those are kind of more related to race. And then when it comes to gender, of course, there are a number of areas where, you know, people kind of change their opinion based on the way they relate to what's going on in these certain cases. And the Kavanaugh case, I think, will be one of them. And I don't know how deep it's going to go, because ultimately I don't think people care about the Supreme Court as much as they might care about other cultural aspects. Of course, right now its importance is being sort of magnified by the political climate of our times. And I can tell you that for me, the event that kind of jarred me, I was no longer really a liberal. I think in a previous video I already talked about my experience, why I kind of decided I can't be a Democrat, and that was kind of because of Al Gore, something completely unrelated to this. But the reason I got into kind of writing and you know, commenting on events is because of a rape on campus scandal. And if you don't know what that is, about 4 years ago in 2014, I believe, a group of frat boys from the Phi Kappa Psi fraternity at the University of Virginia were accused of gang raping a girl who went by the anonymous name Jackie at the University of Virginia at Charlottesville. Ironically, Charlottesville, which is, you know, not now known because of the big rally in 2017. Well, for me, Charlottesville, I was only there, I think I was there only one time in my life. I was there for a Model UN conference. And you go to that campus, which I believe that Thomas Jefferson helped found the University of Virginia. And you see these the colonial architecture. Some of it's colonial, I think some of it's like more classical, and you're kind of blown away. And that did change my attitude towards some of these institutions. Of course, I didn't go to college for several years later, but certainly the University of Virginia was much better than the dump I went to. But in any case, so this case, it turned out that it was just one of a slew of incidents where, you know, you're talking about fraternities that are behaving badly, and then you have all sorts of student unrest, and it was the buildup. This was before Donald Trump became president, so this had nothing to do with politics, had nothing to do really with Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton. That's what got me back into writing and commenting on things, because you know, after 2012, I was kind of not really interested at all. I wasn't even active during the 2012 election. You know, my mom was kind of she was going through hospice at the time. So I was not really interested in politics during that election. 2008, I didn't even vote. So this episode really ignited the skepticism in me. This was the red pill moment for me, where I decided, you know what, you do have to read beyond the headlines. And I didn't immediately digest it, but this was the beginning. It was like planting a seed in your brain. And indeed, a rape on campus, which was a story by the Rolling Stone columnist Sabrina Ardelli, was a rape hoax in every sense of the word. It depended on the word of one anonymous source who refused to be quoted or directly quoted or featured. And basically what this story did was it slandered not just the guys who were members of this fraternity, Phi Beta Psi, or Phi, whatever it was, Phi Kappa Psi. It actually slandered a University of Virginia administrator named Nicola Ramo. For some reason, that name continues to stick in my mind. And there was a pattern here, and I still go back to this and reread some of the paragraphs here every once in a while, because this really is an important story for me, and it talks a little about some of the things that lead to women being taken advantage of in actual rape cases. So in this case, she was invited to her friend's dorms at a late hour of night. She was then imbibed with vodka until becoming intoxicated. This is me talking about a rape episode that I actually knew about, of somebody that I did know. The three others then took advantage of her to a degree that was never revealed to the rest of us. We are not aware if they were simply caught in an improper state of undress, if she was forcibly raped, or somewhere in between. And then I talked about, some of the precautions that women might need to take in order to avoid this happening. And it's to be aware of their surroundings, not presenting themselves as a vulnerable target, learning to defend themselves if needed, not becoming intoxicated to the point where they are easy prey. That follows the same principle as not becoming a vulnerable target, keeping a mobile device or whistle handy if they would need to call for help. And that's really, so later, this was before the whole social justice panic and the Me Too movement. A lot of the proposals that I wrote down there would be considered victim blaming. But the fact of the matter is that Sabrina Ardelli, what she ended up doing was victimizing an entire school, an entire fraternity more specifically, and this school official by claiming that they had covered up a rape that actually never happened. And this case was graded the worst piece of journalism of 2014 by the Columbia School of Journalism, which at the time was considered the gold standard in academic analysis of journalism in the USA. Nowadays, it's really fallen into the toilet like the rest of the media. But that's how bad it was. And Rolling Stone got sued for this. I think they ended up having to settle with Ardelli not with Ardelli, she was the one who wrote it, but with Aramo for something like $3 million. And then they had a different settlement of less money with the frat boys. And that's just one episode. And here's a couple other ones. This is from 1988 with Tawana Brawley.
Falls, a small town in upstate New York. 15-year-old Tawana Brawley was found in a plastic bag. Her hair was cropped off, and the letters KKK and a racial slur were scrawled across her chest. She said she had been assaulted by 6 white men, and she had some startling information about one of them.
What's a cop?
He was a police officer?
Show me a bag.
7 months later, what happened to Tawana Brawley is still a mystery. Medical tests showed no evidence of rape. There have been no arrests, and the case turned into something of a racial powder keg. Brawley has been represented by lawyers Alton Maddox and C. Vernon Mason, along with civil rights activist Reverend Al Sharpton. Together, they refused to let the girl talk.
That's the good old days when Al Sharpton was fat.
To authorities, instead charging that a black cannot get justice in New York State. They gained the support of such prominent people as Bill Cosby and Mike Tyson. But today, Perry McKinnon, a former aide to Reverend Sharpton, in an explosive interview with WCBS reporter Mike Taibbi, cast doubt on the story that Tawana Brawley and her advisors have been telling.
This whole situation is not about Tawana Brawley.
What's it about?
It's about Mason, Maddox, and Sharpton sort of taking over the town, so to speak.
Have they told you this?
Yeah. Their exact words were, we beat this, we will be the biggest niggas in New York.
WCBS asked McKinnon to take a lie detector test. An expert confirmed that McKinnon's story was true, including his warning to Alton Maddox that the facts did not support Tawana's claims.
So people want to talk about a lie detector test. In that case, the accuser of Sharpton passed a lie detector test. There's a lot of back and forth over whether lie detector tests are credible or not. But the fact of the matter is that this case ended up being, clearly that Tawana Brawley, she didn't have any evidence to support her rape accusation, so nothing ended up happening. They were basically acquitted, and then later, I think she was sued and she had to pay. She's still paying this massive settlement to the guys that she accused.
He says, I'm not going to pursue it legally, I'm going to pursue it politically.
That's his
I
answer.
don't care about no facts.
Statements made by Mason, Maddox, and Sharpton seem to confirm that. These include a claim that an assistant district attorney was involved in the attack on Tawana, that the Irish Republican Army had ties to the case, and a comparison of the special prosecutor in the case, New York Attorney General Robert Abrams, to Hitler. When a grand jury investigating the case subpoenaed...
So you can see that back in the 80s, you had this accusation that was baseless, and then when people started to doubt what was happening, or not, or they couldn't find evidence of the prosecutor couldn't find evidence to support the case, Sharpton lashed out at him. And what's Sharpton gotten for this? He hasn't been basically banished from public life because he's a clown. He has a show on MSNBC. He is the media now. So it used to be that he would attack other people and basically claim, well, you guys are evil, and he'd have to go through the media in order to get attention. Now he is the media. That's the Reverend Al Sharpton. And you can see other cases that people were lucky to get out with less pain than it could have been. But I mean, Kobe Bryant, I remember this was, and I'm not a Lakers fan by any means, but I think I remember reading this at the time. I'm like, yeah, I don't think Kobe really did this. And I was probably 2003. I was like 16 years old. So they're still blaming him for something that there's no evidence that he did 15 years later. It's like, let it go. You had your chance to prove it, and well, what are you going to do? But here's the story. Kobe Bryant's Oscar win for Dear Basketball was met with congratulations, but also a fair amount of criticism. Bryant's past, specifically the rape allegation a woman made against him in 2003, became a storyline as social media commenters contrasted Bryant's award with the Me Too and Time's Up movements in support of women who have experienced sexual harassment and assault. Well, I'm sorry to tell you, but Kobe Bryant won the award because he was, and probably is, even though he's retired, an amazing basketball player. Okay, and you have all these people commenting and whatever. Bryant was arrested in July 2003 and charged with sexual assault and false imprisonment after an encounter with the woman at a resort in Colorado. Bryant told investigators the sex was consensual. Eagle County District Judge Jerry Ruckriegel dismissed the charges in September 2004 after Bryant's accuser said she would not testify at trial. Does that remind you of anything? The woman filed a civil suit, which was later settled against Bryant during the police investigation. So the woman refused to actually testify at a criminal trial because it's harder to prove a person's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. But she still went and sued him because that's really what this was about. This was about getting back at Bryant for whatever. Who knows? I will say, I don't care. I don't even like Kobe Bryant. I don't think he raped that woman. Again, I remember this case very well. It was in the news, and I hated the Lakers. I was like, it'd be very convenient if the Lakers lost Kobe Bryant because of this. And then I read the case. I'm like, yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. And then, of course, there's the Duke Lacrosse scandal. Everybody remembers that, I think. Those of you that don't remember, Crystal Mangum, an exotic dancer, she accused, I think, 3 Duke lacrosse players of sexual assault. And that, again, like the Brawley scandal, was considered kind of a racial moment as well. So they're calling this the Duke lacrosse scandal and the birth of the alt-right, which is bullshit. But listen to what the logic around here says, okay? If you're from the walk away movement, listen to what they're trying to say, okay? And I'll try to read through this as fast as possible. After work one day in January 2007, Scott McConnell left his office at the magazine The American Conservative in Arlington, Virginia, and walked to a nearby Thai restaurant that was hosting a panel discussion about the Duke lacrosse scandals. 9 months earlier, 3 members of the university's men's lacrosse team had been accused of raping a black woman they had hired as a stripper. Much of the Duke... Notice the language here. Accused of raping a black woman they had hired as a stripper. They didn't hire her as a stripper. She was a stripper. That was her job. She was an exotic dancer. Much of the Duke... They word it as if this was a person who, by happenstance, they found and they said, well, why don't you come and dance for us? No, this was an exotic dancer. So this is the way that media words these things. They make it seem as if this woman, by happenstance, ended up being where she was. And, no offense to Crystal Mangum, she ended up having, a very bitter life after this. I believe she died in the end. It was kind of a sad case. But, if she would have... Her life was pretty much similar to a lot of the circumstances in this case. She was just kind of a mess of a person, unfortunately. She had a very difficult and unstable life. And she was an exotic dancer. I don't think people can really dance around that, no pun intended. People can't parse words around that. That's what she did. And the fact that they would portray this as other people using her by coincidence that, oh, she came over to the apartment and, they decided that she would be a dancer. No, that's why she was there. She came there in order to entertain clients that she knew wanted her for this. Rightly or wrongly, that's the circumstances. Much of the Duke community, including 88 professors who signed a statement, called the situation a social disaster, declared this was merely the latest and most egregious example of the racist, sexist, and privileged behavior that permeated the elite campus. Jesse Jackson showed up, as did news trucks from every major network, and most of the reporting coalesced around the same narrative. A group of wealthy white men had taken advantage of a poor black woman just as white men had done for centuries. McConnell and his magazine had largely ignored the scandal. Identity politics weren't top of mind for conservative media then, and most outlets weren't especially interested in defending a group of rich jocks who had hired a stripper. By January, the case was imploding. The accuser had changed her story more than half a dozen times. One of the players had a well-documented alibi, and DNA tests found no match with any member of the team, a fact that the prosecutors initially hid from the defense. McConnell was reminded of the bonfire of the... So this is... They're kind of going into like a lot of literary crap here. So let's skip ahead. McConnell and one of his editors, Michael Dougherty, went to the Thai restaurant hoping to find someone to write about the case. They knew most of the speakers, an economics professor and editor at the Washington Times, a men's rights blogger. But their talks were so boilerplate that neither McConnell nor Dougherty could recall much about them. The fourth speaker, however, was a PhD candidate in Duke's history department who delivered a blistering critique of the Duke faculty's rush to prejudgment. Scott and I both thought, here's a young guy, he presents himself well, and his talk was the most interesting of the night, Dougherty said recently. God, I hate to think that we were part of creating this. Richard Spencer, the fourth speaker, is now America's most famous self-identified white nationalist. In this funny chain of events, the Duke lacrosse case changed the course of my career, Spencer told me recently. So this person interviews Richard Spencer. Ironically, a lot of people who talk to Spencer, for example, H.A. Goodman, who's a former progressive, or you could even say Sargon of Akkad, are now called alt-right because they debate Spencer. They try to refute his alt-right ideas. But this person interviews Spencer, and he's not called part of the alt-right. Or is it a she? I don't know. His name's Reeves. Hard to tell. McConnell commissioned Spencer to write a piece for the American Conservative about the case, and by the end of the semester, Spencer had dropped out of school to work at the magazine full-time. A year later, he coined the term alt-right. The charges against the lacrosse players were eventually dropped 10 years ago this week, although many people still falsely remember them as having been declared guilty, and the case's legacy has only become more and more fraught. It has become a touchstone for many on the far right who have cited it to defend everyone from George Zimmerman to Donald Trump. Now, Again, they're conflated. George Zimmerman. Okay, I don't care if all the people on the alt-right are defending George Zimmerman, but he's not a white person. George Zimmerman is half Peruvian. So there's nothing about white pride in this. The man is half Peruvian. And for people to say, oh, this is an alt-right topic. Look, I think George Zimmerman's a weirdo. And I know that he has a violent streak besides what happened with Trayvon Martin. But you cannot make that into an issue of white versus black when, in fact, the assailant, so to speak, was not necessarily a white guy. It chased in the media until it didn't and kneecapped movements at Duke and elsewhere to address issues of racism, sexism, and classism. It not only launched Spencer's career, but that of White House advisor Stephen Miller, too. On the morning of Spencer's talk at the Thai restaurant, Miller, who was then a senior... So if they're so alt-right, why did they eat Thai food? Answer that. Who was then a senior at Duke, published a column in the student newspaper titled The Portrait of Radicalism, just a few days after he appeared on Bill O'Reilly's Fox News to show to chastise Duke's faculty. Donald Trump didn't have much to say about the scandal at the time. He hadn't yet joined Twitter and was devoting his cable news appearances to his simmering feud with Rosie O'Donnell. But Miller seemed interested in little else. He had become known to some at Duke as the Miller outrage machine for his willingness to take controversial stands in his bi-weekly Miller Time column, which he wrote for the campus newspaper as a way, he says, to defend the idea of America. So those of you who don't know, Stephen Miller is, I believe he's the chief strategy advisor for Donald Trump in the White House. In it, Miller complained about Hollywood's lack of movies about the merits of capitalism and wrote a column titled Sorry Feminists, in which he declared, I simply wouldn't feel comfortable hiring a full-time male babysitter or driving down the street and seeing a group of women carrying heavy steel pillars to a construction site. So they're going after him, and they're trying to say this guy is, this incident was the cause of the rise of the far right and the alt-right and whatever you want to say. And listen to exactly what the logic of that is, okay? You people who are the walk-away movement. What they're basically saying is that this is, and if you extrapolate it to today, because this was written way before the Blasey-Ford accusation against Kavanaugh, they're basically saying exactly what I'm saying, these people in the media. They're saying that these false rape allegations can become such a catalyst for change, for people to basically come out of their shell and become openly active in politics, that it created what they call the alt-right. And I guess technically it did create Richard Spencer. So what should be the lesson here? The lesson is that they should have learned back then that if you engage in this listen and believe culture, in this Me Too witch hunting, then what you're going to do is you're going to create a whole backlash of people, the Richard Spencer type or the Stephen Miller type. They're not the same thing, by the way. And you're basically you're shooting yourself in the foot. And just like that was what happened in 2014 when I read this story about a rape on campus, how it was a false story, how it was concocted and used against just a group of college students in order to demonize them and also to demonize the university. You're damn right I was pissed off about it because I'd been to the University of Virginia. I didn't really believe that that was a community that deserved that type of demonization just in order to sell magazines. So you get to this Kavanaugh issue today, and it says here, Kavanaugh's accuser's classmate says that it happened or not, I have no idea. A former classmate of Christine Blasey Ford tells NPR that she does not know if an alleged sexual assault by Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh took place, as she first suggested on social media. That it happened or not, I have no idea, Christina King Miranda told NPR's Nina Totenberg. I can't say that it did or it didn't. That's different from what Miranda wrote Wednesday in a now deleted Facebook post that stated definitively the incident did happen. Many of us heard about it in school. See if we can get that picture. So yeah, this is a deleted tweet. Ford alleges that more than 30 years ago, when she and Kavanaugh were teenagers in high school, he sexually assaulted her at a party, holding her down, groping her, attempting to remove her clothing, and putting his hand over her mouth when she tried to shout. He has categorically denied her allegations, which suddenly put Kavanaugh's nomination on hold as lawmakers seek answers. Miranda's new comments are a significant development in what remains a largely she said, he said account of events between Ford and Kavanaugh. In my Facebook post, I was empowered and I was sure it probably did happen. Miranda told NPR, I had no idea that I would now have to go to the specifics and defend it before 850 cable channels and have my face spread all over MSNBC News and Twitter. Well, you know, when you say something, when you make a grandiose claim, people kind of want to know what you base it on, right? Miranda noted on Twitter that she did not have firsthand knowledge of the incident. And this is her tweet. It says, to all media, I will not be doing any more interviews. No more circus. To clarify my post, I do not have firsthand knowledge of the incident that Dr. Christina Blasey Ford mentions. And I stand by my support for Christine. That's it. I don't have more to say on the subject. So essentially you're saying, oh, I felt that she was correct. Therefore, I decided that I know that it happened. Miranda said staff from the Senate Judiciary Committee had reached out to her, something she was not expected. She said she will not go through with a committee interview if asked. Miranda says she played soccer with Ford, whom she refers to as Chrissy, in high school, and that she continues to support her. Miranda added that despite not knowing specifics of what went on at the party 3 decades ago, she remembers that there was a, quote, buzz that went around possibly on a weekend about the party where an alleged incident involving students from her school and Kavanaugh's took place. It is something, she said, that was not surprising to hear given the culture of drinking and partying, but she remembers being struck by the gravity of what was being talked about. Miranda said she believes Ford, noting that it is unlikely that someone would put herself and her family through such scrutiny if it wasn't true. So essentially she's saying because there was such a atmosphere back 36 years ago of rumors and whatever, it must be true because the rumors back then said it happened. That's ridiculous. You know, there were rumors 36 years ago of the Sasquatch as well. And, you know, unless you have photos or a Sasquatch carcass, nobody has to believe you. Ford's lawyers continue to say that they want a full FBI investigation to take place before Ford will testify. Republicans in the Senate are insisting she testify Monday, either publicly or privately. Democrats have objected to the deadline, not wanting to let the hearing degenerate into Kavanaugh's word against Ford's. They fear that without a shared set of facts, Republicans would simply move quickly after the testimony to confirm Kavanaugh. The FBI has already conducted a background check on Kavanaugh and added Ford's letter to Kavanaugh's file. So if there had been such a thick atmosphere about this incident back in high school, I do believe that somebody would have tipped the FBI off about it. Despite Republicans' claims that this investigation into these matters are the sole responsibility of the Senate, the FBI could open a more extensive investigation. But the White House would have to ask for it. At this point, though, that has not happened and is unlikely to. It would seem that the FBI really doesn't do that, Trump contended Wednesday. They've investigated about 6 times before, and it seems that they don't do that. Asked if he would ask the FBI to open a deeper investigation, Trump said he was content to let the senators do it. He then added that he thinks it's very unfair what's happening to Kavanaugh. It's very unfair, I think, to, as you know, Justice Kavanaugh has been treated very, very tough, and his family, the president said, I think it's a very unfair thing what's going. So I'll tell you this. The Me Too movement, I believe, is creating a lot more of these people that are leaving this this kind of liberal bubble, because people are realizing that it's basically like living in with a foundation of clouds. There's nothing solid about it, and believe me, I think that this saga could backfire on these Democrats and on the liberals as a whole, and create something that they've never even feared before, something that is probably going to haunt them for years afterward. Please like this video, share this video, subscribe to the channel, Bold Like a Leopard, subscribe to my live channel, Razor Ray Live Wounds, and also please support the Walkaway community and comment when this uploads.